I already recorded this video. I've been working on the video all day long and it just keeps messing up. And then it turns out the video's audio file has been corrupted and there is no way to undo it, which means now I gotta re-record it. So say it with me, friends, just like back in the day. I want to die. What's up, everybody? D-Man back. Welcome to a brand new video, and today we're going to be doing another Godzilla X Kong: The New Empire discussion video. For today's video, I want to dive on into the topic of Godzilla's new design, and in particular, where that's coming from, not only in canon, but also out of canon. I want to give a huge shout out to Jared Krzyzewski. He's the one who designed this new Godzilla design, so I want to give him a shout out because it's really cool that he got to design this Godzilla, and I want to celebrate that. A lot of you guys have actually said the final design is one of your fave designs, which I was shocked by. I ran a recent poll on the channel, and it wound up being the #2 most popular MonsterVerse design, but I was surprised to see that 2014 didn't beat it out. Getting into the whole idea of Godzilla's evolution, where does this even come from? I want to do a brief history on that topic in the first place. Godzilla's design has been one undergoing constant changes as far back as the Showa era. Godzilla's origins have always been tied to the idea that he is a creature that evolved unnaturally as the result of the nuclear bomb. In 1954, we're told that Godzilla has existed for far longer than his presence has been known, and that only recently did he start acting aggressively. This is the result of his hydrogen bomb exposure. Well, we don't really have any real information on what Godzilla was supposed to look like pre-nuclear bomb. We know that Godzilla was a giant creature and that his current skin textures are meant to reflect the deterioration due to radiation. We also know that his atomic breath was not something he could naturally do, and this is an effect of the hydrogen bomb. Originally, there really wasn't much thought put into Godzilla's design changing from film to film. The differences between the 1954 suit and the 1955 suit ultimately came down to the fact that Haruo Nakajima couldn't move as easily in the 54 suit. So, in order to make a suit he could move easier in, have more mobility, and perform against another creature actor with, they had to slim the suit down and make alterations. From there, Godzilla's design underwent many changes, sometimes bulking up and then slimming back down, going from completely imposing and aggressive to friendly and then landing somewhere in the middle. And this all leads to many questions fans have had as to how does this make any sense in canon? And for people who want to justify this in the Showa universe, there's a few reasons that we could say this happened, and we can kind of say that the primary Showa Godzilla is the first Godzilla we have ever seen undergo evolution. While there is no real reason given in the movies, nor is it mentioned that his design has changed from film to film, Godzilla's fighting style does evolve over the course of the movies, from being more animalistic and relying on his mass to eventually being much more slim and rapid like a boxer. And while those decisions were influenced by outside factors in order to better aid Godzilla's characters and need from film to film, sometimes they wanted him to be cutesy, sometimes they wanted him to look like a dad, sometimes they wanted him to look badass and like someone you could root for, and sometimes they wanted him to look scary. It depended on who his opponent was going to be, the type of mobility the suit would need, how big he would need to look in comparison to it. But this all influences the movies and can sort of be viewed as Godzilla evolving over the course of the films to become a better king. That is an idea that the MonsterVerse has taken. The Heisei series was the first series to have Godzilla's evolution actually play into the films themselves. Starting as the Godzillasaurus, the atomic bomb radiated Godzilla into the king of the monsters we all know and love. This set the stage so that Godzilla could undergo evolution based on the amount of radiation he absorbed. His design change from 1984 to 1989 really wasn't explained too well, but one can kind of just assume it's Godzilla's body finalizing and having all of its changes set into place as he takes his final shape, because from there, Godzilla's design doesn't change much. Godzilla is hit with a nuclear submarine in 1991, which causes him to absorb more atomic radiation than he was meant to, which leads to him growing from 80 meters to 100 meters. And from there, Godzilla's design remains mostly consistent, with only a few minor alterations being made from movie to movie that really don't factor into the story at all. In 1993, Godzilla is nearly killed by Mechagodzilla, only to be saved by Fire Rodan, who is the state Rodan enters when he himself absorbs too much radiation. Fire Rodan sacrifices himself and transfers his life force into Godzilla, which causes Godzilla to rapidly heal and also unlocks his red spiral atomic breath. While Godzilla's atomic breath was was already upgraded due to the nuclear submarine in 91, now it has a much more powerful red spiral form. That is all the way up until 1995 in Godzilla vs. Destroya, when we learned that the destruction of Bassa Island resulted in Godzilla absorbing an excess of radiation. This causes him to reach his final form as Burning Godzilla with the ultimate red spiral atomic breath. This, for the longest time, has been the pinnacle of Godzilla's evolution because it is the first to be a direct thing that happens in the story. Godzilla's not just growing as a result of radiation, he has changed. While the Millennium Era really didn't play around with the idea of Godzilla evolving too much, the Reiwa Era has put it to use in big ways. The most subtle of these transformations can actually be seen with the Godzilla in the anime trilogy, as his growth over time is far more natural and subtle than his modern counterparts. Over time, we see Godzilla grow in height from 50 meters to 300 meters. There, he has a slightly different posture than his younger self, and most notably features a pronounced and sharp face with chin spikes that resemble a beard. Again, that is something that they have taken inspo from now. Shin Godzilla and Godzilla Ultima took things to the extreme, and both featured the new ability to undergo rapid transformations, often called evolutions, sometimes even in those movies themselves, but more accurately those resemble metamorphoses. These evolutions start as barely resembling Godzilla in the first place, aside from the familiar dorsal plate or so, and then they grow to become more traditional and powerful over time. This eventually leads us to the MonsterVerse itself. Initially, we're led to believe that evolution really doesn't have anything to do with it. Godzilla is a naturally occurring creature who has existed for thousands of years and is simply part of a long lineage. And while there is some debate over whether the Godzilla, the one we know and love, is the only one capable of using the atomic breath as a result of an Iwi legend being mentioned in the novelization for Godzilla vs. Kong, that's simply not the case. Godzilla's atomic breath is actually caused by syntheonuclear glands, which are stored in his throat, and those generate atomic energy that Godzilla can then expel. Why would Godzilla have that ability? Well, it's theorized that Godzilla developed this ability in order to tunnel in and out of the Hollow Earth. Our Godzilla really isn't that special. At the end of the day, what makes him so special is simply that he's the last of his kind, the last one standing, and therefore has the responsibility of keeping the order of the planet entirely on his shoulders. Over time, we've learned that Godzilla in the MonsterVerse has changed a lot, and actually most of the time for pretty specific reasons. In Monarch Legacy of Monsters Episode 3, we go back to 1954 to see Godzilla. Well, I personally consider this scene to be more of a legend than hard canon as a result of the hierarchy of canon making it clear that the opening of Godzilla 2014 supersedes this, therefore anything we see in the Legacy of Monsters sequence is secondary. We are nevertheless told that Godzilla was much smaller in 1954, although his 1954 height is currently unknown. This Godzilla that many argue is the same exact CGI model from the 2014 film, and it just isn't. Let me tell you why. This Godzilla features different proportions in the flashback sequences, with his arms looking much smaller and his overall size being much slimmer. This Godzilla later reappears in 1955 in response to a gadget outputting simulated gamma bursts, and is consistent with the 1954 design. It is much smaller than the one we later see, and it indicates that Castle Bravo really didn't push Godzilla's evolution too rapidly. While it may have played a small factor in Godzilla's growth over time, it didn't cause it to happen all at once. Due to the passage of time and potentially some radiation exposure from Castle Bravo, although more than likely just because Godzilla spent a lot of time in the Hollow Earth in between 1954 and now, Godzilla eventually grows to be 355 feet, now featuring a much more imposing size and stature, and this is the Godzilla who surfaces in 2014. Godzilla does take quite a bit of damage in that movie. Not only does he get some cuts and scrapes and bleeds, but his dorsal spines get cracked, and so he needs to spend some time healing up. Again, due to time and potentially Godzilla absorbing some radiation from the San Francisco nuclear bomb, although that's never stated in canon, more than likely it's because he went to his Hollow Earth temple, Godzilla's growth does continue between films. Shortly after the Godzilla 2014 film, Godzilla does battle with the Muto Prime, in which his spines are completely shattered and in need of repair. When Godzilla surfaces again in 2015, and as of now, I want to be clear, I'm not going to jump ahead in Monarch Legacy of Monsters and spoil anything. As of now, the only appearance Godzilla has had in that show is in episode 6, where we see Godzilla's spines have taken shape quite nicely. They've actually regrown rather quickly, and they now resemble their later 2019 status, although they are considerably smaller, and Godzilla's design is not the 2019 design yet. Godzilla is much slimmer, with different proportions in Monarch Legacy of Monsters. Actually, funny enough, he's got an overbite now, and he is just overall a lot thinner than we will see him in the 2019 film. And maybe this is the case for Godzilla's evolution, is that when Godzilla's growing his spines out, which we know is a big source of his atomic energy, maybe the guy kind of burns some fat and slims out, because we will see the same thing happen with him in Godzilla X Kong. When Godzilla next appears in Godzilla King of the Monsters, he now features a much larger size, now reaching 393 feet. His tail has shrunken considerably to become more club bulb-like, his eyes have grown quite a bit, his facial proportions have shifted, and while his head remained about the same size, his body grew, which now makes his head look smaller. His arms were a little longer here, and his feet are now much larger, with more defined toes that contrast with the pillar-like feet that the 2014 Godzilla had. Godzilla's spines had fully regrown from being those semi-short, sharp, jagged spikes on his back to being much larger and more leaf-like, and now they're more flexible. Due to his injuries from the oxygen destroyer in the film Godzilla King of the Monsters, Godzilla is forced to retreat to his Hollow Earth temple, and there he begins soaking in Hollow Earth radiation, and it's revealed that this is how Godzilla has been healing his wounds, and is how Godzilla has been able to survive for so long. Much like a tree soaking in the sunlight, Godzilla returns to his temple time and time again in order to hibernate, heal, and grow, and this sustains his life force and keeps him the youthful, spry big guy we know and love. In order to speed this process along, Dr. Serizawa uses a nuclear bomb to blast Godzilla with rapid radiation, and for some reason, unlike at Castle Bravo, this juices Godzilla to previously unseen levels. Now, Godzilla has enough atomic breath to flash his spines as part of his intimidation display at will. Previously, this had only ever been done once in the Pacific in order to alert Monarch to an issue, but was clearly not something Godzilla had the energy to do whenever he felt like. Additionally, by charging up his atomic breath, now Godzilla's eyes glow blue. Much like in 1995, we learned that Godzilla has taken on too much radiation and has now entered his final stand, from which he will overload and explode like an atomic bomb. It is through the self-sacrifice of Mothra that Godzilla is able to enter his burning state. Burning Godzilla is a little different in the MonsterVerse than he was in 1995. The 2019 Burning Godzilla is filled with an excess of pure radiation that beams from within him and shines through the cracks in his skin. It's actually expelled in the form of heat. That's why he is able to melt his surroundings, because he is releasing so much radiation. Burning Godzilla is then able to unleash his atomic energy in concentrated doses with the aid of Mothra's spirit. This creates powerful nuclear pulses that diminish his overloaded energy much quicker. Following this, Godzilla is restored to his previous status, and you might initially think he is out of that excess radiation, but he's not. In Godzilla vs. Kong, we see Godzilla has maintained some of this excess radiation. He's now still able to flash his intimidation display frequently and whatever he feels like, and he's actually also gained the ability to make his eyes glow blue at will. He doesn't need to charge up to do it anymore. Godzilla's atomic breath charge up now features a lot of blue energy shining through thin spots on Godzilla's skin, which is actually very similar to what we see when he's in his burning state. This catches us up to Godzilla X Kong: The New Empire, when Godzilla undergoes his most egregious transformation in the MonsterVerse yet. The MonsterVerse Godzilla's evolution over time has clearly taken a lot of inspiration from his previous counterparts, and while it most similarly reflects the Heisei Series Godzilla, the MonsterVerse Godzilla's ability to absorb radiation that changes his appearance, size, and abilities over time does take inspiration from all types of Godzilla. Similar to the Showa era counterparts, Godzilla's changes over time in the MonsterVerse has aided him in becoming a better fighter and in becoming more agile. While in the Heisei era, it basically just bumped Godzilla's beam up a couple levels to make him more powerful that way, this actually transforms Godzilla's body physically to become a better fighter, which is not something we saw done in the Heisei series and calls back to those Showa era transformations. Godzilla X Kong: The New Empire will feature a culmination of all of Godzilla's evolutions, because he will now undergo an evolution in the movie itself rather than off-screen between films, which is very similar to the Reiwa era Godzillas that Toho has used. This will change Godzilla's design and abilities over the course of the film. Now, I do want to give a little bit of a spoiler warning for Godzilla X Kong: The New Empire. It's gonna be kind of hard to talk about this stuff without getting into a little bit of spoilers, because first of all, oh my god, you can't go anywhere online without getting spoiled. So I do want to say minor spoiler warning. I'm gonna keep things pretty vague, and I'm also gonna be transparent about what I know and what I'm guessing. This will be triggered by radiation absorption in the film, which will result in Godzilla growing these new features that help him become a more effective fighter. To explain Godzilla's evolution in Godzilla X Kong: The New Empire, as I understand it, Godzilla's opponent in the film will be a dragon-like creature that comes from an icy part of the planet and actually seems to have ice powers in and of itself. Think like the Frostvark, but much bigger. It is reasonable to assume, although I don't know for sure, that Godzilla is not really going to fare well in a fight against it. That just feels like the type of story that you would tell here. You need Godzilla to have this transformation so that he can kick some ass in the third act. So Godzilla's probably not going to fare well in a fight with this thing one-on-one, and he'll sustain massive injuries like in Godzilla King of the Monsters. And it's possible maybe his spines are severely damaged, which causes them to change. This is most likely going to culminate culminate in Godzilla traveling into the Hollow Earth for shelter so he can continue his cycle of healing just like in King of the Monsters. Unlike before when Godzilla was simply using an exterior cavern that led into the Hollow Earth to gain radiation, his temple's been destroyed, and he's gonna need to find a new source of Hollow Earth radiation, which is better known in the MonsterVerse as Hollow Earth energy, because they don't really love the term radiation, and it's a little scary and loaded, so they just call it Hollow Earth energy. It's the same stuff that juiced Mechagodzilla up. In the Godzilla X Kong the New Empire trailer, we see that there are areas within the Hollow Earth that are just beaming full of this powerful pink energy, such as the area that the Hollow Earth natives live by. And it seems that this is actually going to be the most concentrated form of Hollow Earth energy, and so I think in the movie Godzilla is going to travel to one of these areas for shelter following his fight with the ice dragon. The fact that Godzilla is actually frozen in the cave while absorbing the radiation could mean that he takes on damage during the fight. Maybe he's frozen in place by the ice dragon. If that is the case, that's a really unfortunate place for him to have frozen Godzilla. I actually think more than likely Godzilla is going to travel to this icy cave in order to kind of Superman Fortress of Solitude heal himself. This results in Godzilla's newest evolution. This sees Godzilla's dorsal plates shedding. Unlike in 2019, his dorsal plates don't need to regrow brand new. His current spines are simply just changing. Godzilla's spines will be molting, and they'll be shedding their rocky exterior, and they'll be revealing a new pink crystallized form within. Here's where I'm getting into some outside info that I have. I saw this stuff a long time ago. A lot of these ideas seem to have been changed for the film, but it seems like at one point the idea was to have Godzilla's rocky exterior spines shed away and reveal flesh underneath. It was kind of going to be flesh, and it was going to be red. So I think at one point he was going to have red spines, and they were basically going to be flesh rather than the pink crystals we see in the trailer. Also, I have seen some concept art of Godzilla from this movie that comes from a while ago. Godzilla's got red spines in it, as he does in the Playmates toys, which will be coming out alongside the movie. That makes me think that maybe Godzilla's spines are going to be naturally red in the New Empire, and they'll only be pink when he's charged up or using his intimidation display. That very well could be the case, and if that's the case, I think that's going to be very fun to watch on screen. I wouldn't get your hopes up though. It seems like the pink is just going to be the way they are. The reason this happened is because the spines have continued to grow beyond their 2019 status, and in order to do so, they need to shed their hard layer in order to have some more flexibility. Additionally, Godzilla's design now features brand new proportions. Godzilla's head is much larger with eyes that seem to feature a dull glow regardless of if he's charged or not, but when he charges up, they really glow. Godzilla's upper body has grown considerably, with the most notable changes being that his neck is longer and it leads to much longer arms. Godzilla's hands have become much wider with sharper claws. He also now features very large elbow spikes that are very good for defense and combat. Godzilla's lower body is sort of snatched with this waist that dives in, and he's got these slimmer legs that feature these intensely muscular thighs that make him the perfect sprinter. It's presumed that his size has changed again and he's now taller than he was before. As I understand it, his posture has changed, with him now being able to run forward more arched like the 1998 Godzilla. I think that's going to be kind of how Godzilla carries himself in the new film as a result of his new spines and his new proportions. Godzilla's design also features a much sharper face now with exaggerated bone structure and additional spines running along his neck and up his head, which calls back to the Millennium Godzillas, from whom his dorsal spines are also very clearly inspired. He also now features small spikes on his chin that call back to Godzilla Earth's beard, and this Godzilla also features an unseen tail. We've not seen it in any of the proper marketing, but it is on the Playmates toys and all the other toys that have been leaked. And unlike the 2019 tail, it is much longer while still retaining the club shape. Atop the tip of the tail is these large, sharp spines that are way more offensive than they ever have been before. Finally, this new Godzilla features a pink, powerful charge-up that ignites the spines on his head. He also has this energy flowing from within him in the cracks of his body, and it actually also causes these electric-type ripples off of his spines when they energize. Godzilla can now unleash a wispy pink atomic breath that seems intensely powerful, and while it seems that this new state is less powerful than Godzilla's burning form, it's far better fit for combat and is way more sustainable, as he won't deplete over time in it. This is simply Godzilla now. It's safe to say that simply because it'll sell more toys, following Godzilla X Kong the New Empire, Godzilla's design is gonna change again. This state's temporary. Maybe the Hollow Earth energy will deplete, or maybe it'll just be that the bone structure grows over the spines again. I don't think we're gonna be seeing them crystallized like this forever. Assuming they make another movie after Godzilla X Kong the New Empire, I'd also assume that the proportions are gonna settle into place with a more finalized version of this design that will probably go back to being blue atomic breath, or maybe it'll simply make the leap to red. But I think the mixed reception to this design is probably gonna deter them from keeping it in the future, also because, hey, at the end of the day, you want to know the real reason Godzilla's design changes so much, because toys sell so well. You gotta have a new Godzilla design to sell more toys, and so that's what they're doing. That's the reason that Shin Godzilla had multiple forms. That's the reason they were okay with Godzilla Ultima having multiple forms. It's also a primary factor factor that goes into a lot of the decisions that went into Godzilla X Kong the New Empire. As I understand it, and I could be mistaken about this, but as I understand it, the MonsterVerse makes the bulk of its money through outside means than just the box office. Through toy sales, through merchandise, through apparel, through all that good stuff. And having a new Godzilla design is a really great way to keep sales up, and man, do those Playmates toys sell well. Ultimately, at the end of the day, that's the reason Godzilla's design has changed, but in canon, it's simply because Godzilla has found a new source of Hollow Earth energy that is very different from the stuff he normally gets. In fact, maybe the reason Godzilla has stayed away from this stuff is because it super juices him and makes his body all whacked out. Maybe it's a bit more of an unnatural evolution for him to have undergone, and so he kind of stays away from it on the whole and only dives into the atomic energy that heals him rather than changes him as rapidly. Thank you for sticking with me on this one, guys. I want to give a huge thank you to my patrons over on Patreon. If you want to support the Patreon, you can using the link in the description below, where you can get early access to content, access to the Discord community, and more. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I will see you guys next time for the next one. D-Man out.